Good morning, and thank all of you for being here today. A year and a half ago, on January 29th, 2019, our former chairman, Elijah Cummings, held this committee's first hearing of the new Congress. The topic of that hearing was the same issue we are examining this week: the astronomical price increases of prescription drugs. Chairman Cummings cared deeply about this issue. As the very first witness to come before our committee, we invited Ms. Antoinette Worsham. You may remember her. She testified about the devastation of losing her daughter, who had to ration insulin because she simply could not afford it. Since Chairman Cummings is not with us today, I'd like to ask the committee's indulgence to play a short clip of his opening statement from that hearing.
I've been waiting a very long time to hold this hearing. For the past decade, I've been trying to investigate the actions of drug companies for all sorts of drugs, old and new, generic and brand name. We've seen time after time that drug companies make money hand over fist by raising the prices of their drugs, often without justification and sometimes overnight, while patients are left holding the bill. The pharmaceutical industry is one of the most profitable in the world and one of the most powerful. 14 drug companies each made more than $1 billion in profits just in the third quarter of 2018. And they have the best lobbyists money can buy. Let me be clear. There are powerful interests here that do not want us to interfere with those massive profits. But there's a strong bipartisan consensus that we must do something meaningful to rein in the out-of-control price increases. Even President Trump has said that drug companies are, quote, getting away with murder, end of quote. But tweets are not enough. We need real action and meaningful reforms. We all recognize that research and development efforts on groundbreaking medications have made immeasurable contributions to the health of Americans, including new treatments and cures for diseases that have affected people for centuries. But the bottom line is that the ongoing escalation of prices by drug companies is simply unsustainable. This is a matter, literally, of life and death. And we have a duty to act now. Our constituents are demanding it, and I am grateful that we are finally starting down the road with this hearing.
I remember Chairman Cummings at that hearing so very well, sitting right here in this very chair, listening intently to Ms. Worsham's testimony, his fierce determination, his empathy. I remember how he promised at the end of that hearing to do everything in our power to make sure no family ever faces this situation again. At that moment, Chairman Cummings was in the process of launching our committee on one of the most comprehensive and in-depth investigations of drug pricing ever conducted by Congress. Today, 18 months later, I am honored to report some of our initial findings. At the outset, it's important to note that drug companies make products we all need. We rely on this industry to develop critical new therapies, treatments, and vaccines. But our committee's investigation has revealed deeply troubling facts about how these companies price the drugs we all rely on. Our committee has now reviewed more than 1 million pages of documents from some of the largest and most profitable drug companies in the world. These include internal corporate strategy documents and communications among top executives. Let me briefly describe 3 main findings from these documents. First, The documents show that these price increases are unsustainable, either for government health programs or patients themselves. The documents that we reviewed show that drug companies continue to raise prices while raking in record profits and continue to put their products further out of reach for patients in need. To start this week's back-to-back hearings, we will hear today from the CEOs of 3 companies. We will hear from the former CEO of Celgene and the former CEO of Bristol Myers Squibb, which acquired Celgene last year. These companies sell the cancer drug Revlimid. They have tripled the price of this drug since 2005. Today, a course of this drug is priced at more than $16,000 a month. That's just per month. We will also hear from the CEO of the drug company, Teva, which sells the multiple sclerosis drug Copaxone. The company raised the price of this drug 27 times in 1997. A yearly course is now priced at $70,000, nearly 7 times higher than when it was first introduced. To put this in perspective, that's more than the median household entire income for the year in the United States. Second, the document reveals by the committee show that these massive price increases are based on generating windfall profits for these companies, their shareholders, and their executives. We've all heard the talking points from the drug companies and their lobbyists, claiming they need to raise prices to pay for research on life-saving medications, that pharmacy middlemen are driving up the prices, or that they are committing significant funds to helping patients who can't afford the drugs. But the committee's investigation shows that those claims are utterly bogus. They do not hold water. The documents we reviewed show that time and time again, drug companies hike prices to meet their earnings targets, and in some cases, so executives can get their personal bonuses for the year. Finally, these documents show that drug companies are targeting the United States for the biggest price increases in the world. They know the federal government is currently prohibited by law from negotiating directly with drug companies to lower prices for Medicare beneficiaries. This may be the starkest finding of all. I was astonished to see some of the new documents we will be discussing today. The United States is where the drug companies are increasing their prices, much more than in any other country. And this is where they are making billions of dollars in profits. Last December, the House passed H.R. 3, and we named it in honor of Elijah E. Cummings, Lower Drug Costs Now Act. This legislation would authorize Medicare to negotiate directly with drug companies for lower prices. President Trump supported this change on the campaign trail, but unfortunately he broke his campaign promise and he now opposes the change. The White House issued a statement declaring that if H.R. 3 were presented to the president, quote, he would veto the bill, end quote. Instead of taking on the pharmaceutical industry like he promised, President Trump appointed former industry executives to key positions. These included Joe Grogan, the former director of White House Domestic Policy Council. Mr. Grogan personally wrote an op-ed opposing H.R. 3 1 week before we passed it in the House. Here is the bottom line. As a result of President Trump's reversal, drug prices have continued to skyrocket under his tenure, and drug company executives have continued to get rich. A recent report found that drug companies have raised the list prices of more than 600 single-source brand-name drugs by a median of 21.4% just between January 2018 and June 2020. By any measure, President Trump has failed to rein in out-of-control drug prices. There is no doubt that he has been scrambling ahead of the election. He promised to hand out a paltry $200 discount cards, but he failed to explain how this will help people facing tens of thousands of dollars in drug costs. The president also claimed he is banning U.S. companies from charging more than they charge abroad. But experts expose this tiny demonstration project as a transparent and futile attempt to create the impression of action where there really has not been any. Let me close with this. As Chairman Cummings would have wanted, we need to focus on the people this affects the most. I would like to play statements from two patients who want to share their experiences with us about these two drugs. And we will now play the patient videos.
I'm Ramey Hammering. I'm 50 years old, and I'm from Bemidji, Minnesota. I'm a single mom with 2 kids in college. In 2018, I was diagnosed with an incurable cancer called multiple myeloma. Before my diagnosis, I was a high school math teacher and a long-distance runner, but now I can no longer do either. I rely on a drug called Revlimid to keep me alive. My out-of-pocket costs are around $15,000 a year, which is impossible for me to cover on my fixed income. In order to keep taking this drug, I will have to deplete my life savings, cash out my 401k, and sell my house. When those funds run out, I'm not sure what I'll do. Usually I'm a planner, but I cannot plan for this. I am terrified for my future. My circumstances make me feel helpless at times, but I'm grateful that I can share my story with all of you. I urge you to consider patients like me as you work to hold drug companies accountable and fix this broken system. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Therese Humphrey Ball. I am 66 years old and I live in Portage, Indiana. I spent my life working as a nurse, watching people struggle to afford prescription drugs. I never thought it would happen to me until 2003, when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Shortly after my diagnosis, I began taking Copaxone, which cost $1,800 per month at that time. And after 1 year of paying for my treatment, I wiped out my savings. And after that, I had to rely on grants to cover the cost. In 2017, I lost my grants. And at that time, the price of Copaxone had risen to $6,000 a month. I could no longer afford it, so I went without the drug. When I was not on the drug, I lost short-term memory and experienced other declines in my cognitive functions. This makes it difficult for me to enjoy the things that I love, like spending time with my grandchildren. My condition shouldn't progress faster just because drug companies want to make a few extra bucks. This drug company price gouging needs to change. As each of you works to reform this system, I hope you consider patients like me. Thank you.
Thank you, and I now recognize the ranking member for as much time as he would like for his opening statement.